Hey everyone, it's Trent here doing a brand new review for you. You might notice I've got a brand new haircut. Not that this has any relevance in the review whatsoever. This is an extremely belated review, one that I must apologise for. But I'm doing it today, so who cares? And today we're going to be talking about Silent Hill 3. About bloody time, Trent. About bloody time. Admittedly, I've never looked at the instruction manual for Silent Hill 3. This is my very first time. And I don't know, I think they should go back and make the thick, chunky ones again, because they put more thought and detail into it. And in particular, this is probably my favourite instruction manual, because the presentation is just amazing, in a very morbid sense it is. Again, no relevance to the review, thought I'd just add it in there anyway. Let's begin, shall we? So Silent Hill 3 is the direct sequel to Silent Hill 1 and takes place 17 years after Harry Mason defeats the town's god. He is given a baby to take care of by Alessa. He has decided to relocate him and his daughter to the town of Portland, and he has renamed her Heather. So it comes to no surprise that you get to take control of Heather Mason in this game, and she is Silent Hill's first and only female protagonist. Fun fact, I thought you might want to know. Heather realises pretty quickly on that she is being pursued by a cult called the Order, and the Order are trying to execute their devious plans by getting her to birth their god so they can be ushered into the eternal paradise. Ooh. Overall, I feel that Silent Hill 3 is an extremely solid and worthwhile sequel to the very first game. What I've noticed almost immediately about Silent Hill 3 though is the extreme lack of subtlety. And what I mean by that is the first two games, Silent Hill 1 and 2, started off with like a clip or a bit of dialogue at the beginning, and then it slowly but surely drags you into the gameplay. Silent Hill 3 hits the ground running. Call it baptism by fire if you want. Heather starts off immediately walking through a dream state in a dilapidated amusement park, wondering if it's even real or if it's just some sort of terrible nightmare, only to be hit by a roller coaster at the very end of the dream, waking up to find herself in a cafe. That's practically where the story begins. I really do have to put a heavy emphasis on this, and I'd urge you to listen to this advice. Please play Silent Hill 1 before you play Silent Hill 3, if you are a first time player that is. Silent Hill 1 is the background, is the backbone for Silent Hill 3. The story is not going to make sense if you have not played part 1, because the story is very direct, it gets straight to the point, and if you have not played Silent Hill 1, you might as well be chasing the omnipresent fog in the city, which is practically endless. So after the main dream scene in which Heather gets hit by a roller coaster and wakes up in the cafe, it does follow suit from Silent Hill 1 and 2 though. The story does progress rather slowly, a bit too slow burnt for me actually. It does pick up in the latter half of the game though, mind you, and it does culminate in the somewhat shocking, very lengthy ending, might I say. I think it's about 12 minutes long, the ending. Pretty long, but overall, it's a good story. So wrapping up the story section before I move on to the characters, finally I just want to say that I found the story, or the narrative, so well written. Not a second of script time was wasted. It was so to the point. It was directive. It gave you the information that you needed. No muss, no fuss. That's what I really loved about the script of Silent Hill 3. It's not as psychological or as cerebral as Silent Hill 1 or 2. It gets to the point, and it done a good job. So the character cast in Silent Hill 3 were quirky, odd, entertaining, somewhat demented. So Heather Mason is our main protagonist. I really enjoyed Heather as she is a plain Jane, and I've really commended Team Silent for giving us plain Janes or average Joes, as we can relate to them more. And Heather is very much a typical teenager, a very typical 17-year-old girl. She's going to cry when she's sad, she's going to yell when she gets upset. Overall, her character, headstrong, vulnerable, relatable. That is Heather in a nutshell pretty much. Other characters include Claudia Wolf, who plays the very convincing antagonist of Silent Hill 3. She is the malevolent priestess. Vincent, who is a curious case of the friend or foe situation. You don't know what his laugh or his smile hides. And I found this guy overall dark and hypocritical. And our final character on the lineup was Douglas Carter, who is a private detective who is sent to stalk Heather Mason. A curious case of, can I trust this guy? He comes from a shady background, and also there's this little mention of him going on a missing persons case, and a lot of people speculate this might be James Sunderland from Silent Hill 2, because he said he never found this guy. Fun little snippet of info I thought you might be able to benefit from. What do you guys think? All in all, it was a great cast of characters at the end of the day. There was just enough ambiguity to these characters to keep me thinking, and overall I thought the voice actors were decent overall. So the gameplay of Silent Hill 3 is a close semblance to Silent Hill 1 and 2. There's not much difference here. The three main pillars of gameplay being puzzles, combat, and exploration. Okay, while the gameplay aspect of Silent Hill 3 is copy and paste for the most part, there's still a few noticeable changes here that will keep it quite relevant and fresh. Most noticeable changes in the gameplay being the ability to block attacks, strafing from left to right to avoid enemy flanks, the new addition of the family called the Bulletproof Vest, which can lessen the damage inflicted to you, and a much larger weapon loadout. There are a lot more weapons here in this game, so if you like Morning Stars, shotguns, katanas, lightsabers, you are in for one treat. Silent Hill staples such as the breast pocket torch and the radio still remain gladly in check, which I really appreciate. I've also noticed that enemy encounters were a lot more frequent in Silent Hill 3 compared to Silent Hill 1 and 2, and a lot more of the environments are confined or tightly compact, which can make combat irksome and often unavoidable at times. For example, going to the apartment complex and seeing 3 sleepers on the ground with nowhere to run can be quite a chore. Camera angles have been somewhat improved to some extent. It might seem quite cosmetic in nature, and it is very true. I didn't really notice much difference from Silent Hill 2 to Silent Hill 3 in terms of the camera, but I don't know, you can be the judge for that. With Silent Hill being famous for creating ingenious monster designs, Silent Hill 3 is definitely no exception. While the monsters of Silent Hill 3 weren't entirely reflective or psychological in nature, there are a wide plethora of enemies for you to fight, such as slurpers, pendulums, Cerberus dogs, insane cancers, and my favourite enemy, which was Valtiel, who was a strange valve-turning monster. You don't actually get to fight him, but he holds some hidden meanings, some symbolic meaning. And while he's not necessarily a monster, he is still my favourite. There are also puzzles in Silent Hill 3 which I really like, a lot of them being around the unorthodox nature. A lot of them did require a bit of muscle though, they did require you to do a bit of thinking. And even one puzzle which I did on hard mode and which required knowledge on a Shakespearean play which I knew nothing about, and I actually did have to Google that. You didn't hear me say that. You did not hear me say that. So in summary, the gameplay of Silent Hill 3 was pretty much the same as Silent Hill 2, with a few minor cosmetic changes. You either love it or you hate it, there's really no middle ground here, but this game is a 2003 game. What can you expect? So when it comes to the visuals of Silent Hill 3, I've made a point in videos that graphics aren't important in other games such as first-person shooters, beat-em-ups, etc, etc. Same can't be said for survival horror. Survival horror depends on atmosphere, ambience and tone, and graphics is one of the best ways to do that. The graphics of Silent Hill 3 and the presentation overall was exquisite. I really enjoyed the little details. It's the little things that matter, such as facial animations which were beautifully rendered, clothing textures which were quite realistic for its time I thought, and I really loved the blood encrusted, rusty, overworld effects that they come up with. It just has a strange, repulsion, attractive feel to it. Some of the environments, which were also incredibly unique and interesting to look at. It seems that in places walls were on fire, some of the walls were bleeding, some of the floors had swarms like insects coming around you, like something was going to drag you into the depths of hell. It was just so nice to look at. Graphics don't make the game at all, but Silent Hill 3, the graphics have aged gracefully. Still looks spectacular to this day. If you don't believe me, have a look. Also, wrapping up the graphics section, I do want to talk about some of the environments, the in-game environments. Silent Hill 3 possesses my favourite environments in any survival horror game, bar none. My absolute favourite scene or environment in the game would have to be the carousel scene at the amusement park, but a lot of the environments were so consistent and amazing to look at. Brookhaven Hospital, which was a very good nod and wink to Silent Hill 2. The dilapidated apartment complex, and the very unsettling church, the final area which you have to visit. Finally, Silent Hill 3 visually is just an eyegasm. It's truly something to behold. Yeah, you might need a tetanus shot after seeing all that blood and rust, but hey, it's survival horror. In my eyes, a Silent Hill review isn't complete until mentioning the soundtrack, and the soundtrack of Silent Hill 3, if truth be told, it's not my absolute favourite of Akira's work, but it's still a good score. It accompanies the game like a T. It fits it perfectly. The only reason why I'm saying it's not my favourite of his work is that 70% of the tracks are ambient tracks, the 30 being vocal tracks. The vocal tracks being my absolute favourite. The ambient tracks, some of them were quite nice. Some of them were quite melody driven. Yet a lot of them were horror driven as well, and playing it on your iPhone on the bus or walking down the street, it's not something you really want to hear. So it's not all encompassing like the Silent Hill 2 score was, for example. It's still a good listen. In conclusion of Silent Hill 3 and wrapping up my review, Silent Hill 3 is a beast of a sequel. Yes, it takes more of a violent and visceral approach to the horror, as to oppose the more surrealist yet cerebral approach that Silent Hill 1 and 2 took. It wears it beautifully though. It's not trying to live in Silent Hill 2's shadow. I've made a point of this in a rant video, unfortunately, that Silent Hill 3 isn't living in the success of Silent Hill 2. That's what I really admire about it. And sadly, when I talk to people about Silent Hill 3, it's kind of like Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. A lot of people kind of ignore it. They kind of forget that it was part of the series. Like, what was their favourite Resident Evil? A lot of people will say Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 1. They completely ignore Resident Evil 3. It's the same with Silent Hill 3. A lot of people would say Silent Hill 1 or Silent Hill 2. That's a shame, because Silent Hill 3 is a brilliant game. You think of it as oranges and apples. Silent Hill 2 is apples. Silent Hill 3 is oranges. Still in the same family, just for different taste. Sadly, the offset is that the game is rather short. I can beat it in practically 2 hours and 10 minutes, which is my best time. And the story is going to be difficult for people to grasp who have not played Silent Hill 1, which is why I've made that a fact. Play part 1 before part 3. You'll thank me later. And I must share a little secret. If I do take Silent Hill 2 out of the equation, a lot of the times I'd go back and forth between them. I'd say that Silent Hill 3 is my actual favourite. And collectively and categorically, Silent Hill 3 would be the better game than Silent Hill 2, but because the story aspect of Silent Hill 2 is so strong and so powerful, Silent Hill 2 will always be the best, but Silent Hill 3 is not far behind. So long story short, great game. It's quite short. It's got a story which could be confusing for new players, but played in the dark, played alone, you're going to have a hell of a time. So that was it. That was the review. I hope you enjoyed it. Please feel free to leave your ideas, suggestions, opinions about what you thought about Silent Hill 3 in the comment section below. Thank you for watching the review. I shall see you next time. See you later.